You shouldn't trust me, the man says before Sophie even closes the car door, his voice calm, almost too calm, cutting through the steady rhythm of rain tapping against the windshield. And for a second, she just freezes there with one foot still on the curb, her soaked sneakers squishing against the pavement, her jacket clinging to her skin like a second layer of cold, because everything she's ever been told echoes in her head. Don't get in. Don't be stupid. Don't trust strangers. But the street behind her is empty. The bus never came. Her phone died 20 minutes ago, and the last of her cash is a crumpled $20 bill in her pocket that won't get her anywhere tonight. Not in a city this big. Not at this hour. Not with the temperature dropping fast enough to see her breath. So she looks at him. Really looks this time. At the clean lines of his face lit by the dashboard glow, the way his hands rest steady on the wheel. Not impatient. Not pushing. Just waiting, like the choice is entirely hers. And somehow that makes it harder, not easier. Her heart pounding louder than the rain as she finally slides into the seat and pulls the door shut, the sound sealing something she can't undo. And for a few seconds neither of them speaks, just the hum of the engine and the faint scent of leather and something subtle, expensive maybe, nothing like the grease and coffee that clings to her after a double shift at the diner. She curls her fingers around the edge of her sleeve to stop them from shaking, trying to act like this is normal, like she does this all the time, even though she doesn't, even though this feels like stepping into a story that could go either way. And then he glances at her briefly, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes before he asks, almost casually, "Why would you trust a stranger?" And she lets out a small breath, a shaky half-laugh that doesn't quite hide the truth, staring straight ahead as the city lights blur through the rain. "I don't," she admits, quietly, her voice softer than she expects, more honest than she planned. "I just don't have another choice." And something in the air shifts, something unspoken, as if that answer mattered more than she realizes, as if this ride isn't just a ride at all, and she doesn't know it yet. But the man behind the wheel isn't just watching the road. He's watching her. The car moves smoothly through the rain-soaked streets, tires slicing through shallow puddles as neon reflections stretch and bend across the windshield. And Sophie keeps her eyes forward even though she can feel his attention shift toward her in brief, quiet glances, not invasive, not obvious, just enough to make her aware that she is being studied in a way she cannot quite explain. Her fingers still curled around the edge of her sleeve until she finally loosens them and wipes her damp hands against her jeans, trying to ground herself in something real, something familiar, because this car, this silence, this man, none of it feels like her world. And yet here she is, sitting in it, breathing it in, and for a moment she wonders how quickly a single decision can change everything. "Where do you need to go?" he asks, his tone steady, practical, as if this is nothing more than a normal ride. And she hesitates before answering, not because she does not know, but because saying it out loud makes it real. "Anywhere near Eastbrook Avenue is fine," she says softly, leaving out the part about the cheap motel she has been calling home for the past week. The flickering hallway lights, the thin walls that let every sound bleed through the night. She does not want him to picture that version of her, even though it is the truth. He nods once. No questions, no judgment, just a quiet acceptance that feels unfamiliar. And the car continues forward, steady and controlled, like him, like everything about him. And then, almost as if he is thinking out loud, he says, "People usually have a reason when they take risks like this." And she lets out a small breath, watching a pair of headlights pass by in the opposite direction. "Yeah," she replies, her voice quieter now. "Usually it is because the safer option is not really an option." And there is a pause after that, a longer one this time, filled only by the sound of rain and the low hum of the engine, until something small breaks. The silence, a soft thud near her feet. She glances down and notices a leather wallet resting against the edge of her shoe. It must have slipped from somewhere, maybe the console, maybe his coat. She picks it up instinctively. The material smooth and unmistakably expensive even to her touch. And for a split second her mind flashes to the $20 in her pocket, to the empty fridge back at the motel, to the uncertainty waiting for her tomorrow morning. And then just as quickly, she pushes that thought away, lifting the wallet toward him. "I think this is yours," she says, holding it out. And he looks at it, then at her, his expression unreadable for just a second too long before he reaches over and takes it back. "Thank you," he says simply, but there is something different in his voice now, something quieter, heavier, as if that small moment carried more weight than either of them expected, and Sophie leans back slightly in her seat, exhaling slowly, unaware that in the space of a few seconds, she has just answered a question she did not even know was being asked. The car slows slightly as they pass under a flickering streetlight, rain softening into a quiet drizzle that leaves streaks across the glass, and Sophie shifts in her seat, the tension that once gripped her beginning to loosen, just a little, replaced by something unfamiliar, not quite comfort, but no longer fear, and she notices the way he drives, steady, controlled, never rushing through yellow lights, never weaving through traffic like so many others do in this city, as if he has nowhere urgent to be and all the time in the world to get there, which feels strange, because everyone she knows is always rushing, always chasing something, always one step away from losing it all, and she wonders what it must be like to move through life without that weight pressing against your chest every second. Long shift? He asks after a while, his voice breaking through her thoughts, and she nods instinctively before realizing he cannot see her clearly. "Yeah, 12 hours, she says, brushing a damp strand of hair behind her ear. "Diner on 5th. We were short-staffed," she adds, not sure why she is explaining. But the silence seems to invite honesty, and he glances at her again, brief but attentive. "That sounds exhausting," he says, not as a polite response, but like he actually means it, and something about that makes her let out a small laugh, tired and genuine. "It is, but it is what I have right now," she replies, and there is no bitterness in her voice, just a quiet acceptance that feels heavier than any complaint, and he seems to notice that too, his grip on the steering wheel tightening just slightly before he speaks again. "And it is enough?" he asks, the question simple but loaded, and Sophie looks out at the blurred city lights, thinking about the overdue rent notices, the empty fridge, the uncertainty waiting for her tomorrow morning, and then she shrugs softly. "It has to be," she says, because saying anything else would feel like admitting defeat, and for a moment, neither of them speaks again, until the car slows to a stop at a red light, the glow washing over the interior, painting everything in a muted red hue, and he turns slightly toward her, studying her face with a kind of quiet focus that makes her chest tighten without knowing why. "What would you do?" he begins, his tone careful, almost testing. "If someone offered you an easier way out?" And she blinks, caught off guard by the question. Her first instinct is to laugh it off, but something about the way he asks it feels serious, like the answer matters more than it should, and she takes a breath, choosing her words slowly. "Depends on what it costs," she says, her voice steady now, grounded, because nothing that sounds easy ever really is. And the light turns green, but he does not move. Immediately, just a fraction of a second longer than necessary, as if holding on to that answer, before the car rolls forward again, smooth and controlled, and Sophie leans back against the seat, unaware that every word she has spoken tonight is being measured, not judged, not dismissed, but quietly, carefully weighed against something far bigger than a simple ride home. The rain begins to ease as the city thins out, buildings giving way to quieter streets where the glow of storefronts fades into dim porch lights and shadowed sidewalks. And Sophie notices the shift immediately, because this part of town feels different, slower, almost forgotten, the kind of place people pass through without really seeing, and she presses her lips together slightly as she watches a familiar intersection approach, her chest tightening just a little because this is where her reality waits for her again, not the calm silence of a warm car, but the flickering sign of a run-down motel and a door that does not quite lock properly. And for a moment, she almost wishes the ride would stretch just a few blocks longer, just enough to delay stepping back into everything she has been trying not to think about. "You can drop me up here," she says quietly, pointing toward the corner before the motel comes into full view, her voice careful, almost casual, as if it does not matter. But he slows the car anyway, following her direction without question, the tires crunching softly over wet gravel as he pulls to a stop near the curb. And for a second neither of them moves, the engine still running, the faint hum filling the space between them, and Sophie reaches for the door handle before hesitating, glancing back at him with a small, uncertain smile. "Thank you," For the ride, she says, meaning it more than she expected, because tonight could have gone very differently. And somehow it did not. And he studies her again, that same quiet focus in his eyes, as if memorizing something he does not want to forget, before he nods once. Get home safe. He replies, simple, steady, but there is something beneath it, something unspoken that lingers in the air even after the words fade, and she pushes the door open, stepping out into the cool night air, the damp pavement reflecting the dim streetlight above, and as she closes the door, the sound feels louder than it should, final in a way she cannot explain. She turns and starts walking, not looking back at first, telling herself it was just a ride, just a stranger, nothing more. But after a few steps she glances over her shoulder anyway, and the car is still there, engine idling, his silhouette barely visible behind the glass, and for a brief second their eyes meet again through the distance. And then the car pulls away smoothly, disappearing down the street as if it was never there at all, leaving behind nothing but the fading echo of something she cannot quite name. And Sophie stands there a moment longer than she should, her hand still resting near her pocket where the last $20 remains untouched, before she exhales slowly and turns toward the motel, unaware that just a few blocks away, the man who just drove off is already reaching for his phone, his expression no longer neutral, no longer distant, but focused, deliberate, as if a decision has just been made. The motel hallway smells faintly of cleaning solution and something older that never quite fades, and Sophie walks past flickering overhead lights that hum softly, each step echoing just enough to remind her how empty the place really is at this hour. She fumbles with her key for a second before the door finally clicks open, and the room greets her the same way it always does, small, quiet, barely warm. A single lamp casting a dull glow over a bed that has seen better days, and she closes the door behind her with a soft exhale, leaning against it for a moment as if holding it shut against everything outside, her fingers still curled slightly from the cold, her mind replaying the ride in fragments she cannot seem to shake. The way he spoke, the questions he asked, the way he listened, not like someone passing time, but like someone paying attention for a reason, and she pushes off the door, moving slowly across the room, setting her damp jacket over the back of a chair before sitting on the edge of the bed, her hand slipping into her pocket to feel the crumpled $20 bill still there, untouched, and she stares at it for a second before letting out a quiet breath, because tonight she could have used it, could have made a different choice, but she did not, and she is not entirely sure why that matters, only that it does, somewhere deeper than logic, and she leans back slightly, staring up at the ceiling as the faint sound of rain continues outside, softer now, almost distant, and for the first time in days, her thoughts drift somewhere other than worry, not far, not completely, but just enough to notice the absence of it. Meanwhile, across the city, the car moves through brighter streets, the quiet neighborhoods replaced by glass buildings and clean lines of steel and light, and the man behind the wheel no longer looks like a stranger passing through the night. His posture shifts, his focus sharpens, and when he finally pulls into an underground garage, the space opens wide and pristine, a stark contrast to everything Sophie knows. He parks without hesitation, the engine falling silent as he reaches for his phone, his reflection briefly visible in the dark screen before it lights up, and he scrolls through a list of names with practiced ease before selecting one. The call connects almost immediately. "I need a background check," he says, his voice calm, controlled. Nothing like the casual tone from earlier. "Name is Sophie Carter." There is a pause as he listens, his gaze steady, already moving ahead of the moment. "No, nothing urgent," he adds after a second, though something in his expression suggests otherwise, just thorough. And when the call ends, he remains seated for a moment longer, fingers resting lightly against the steering wheel, replaying the night in his own way, the hesitation, the honesty, the small decisions that revealed more than words ever could. And somewhere between those details, something settles into place, not a conclusion, not yet, but a direction. And as he finally steps out of the car, the weight of that decision follows him, quiet, deliberate, already beginning to change what comes next, even if she has no idea it has already begun. Morning arrives too quickly, pale light slipping through the thin curtains of Sophie's motel room as the distant hum of traffic replaces the quiet rhythm of last night's rain, and she blinks awake slowly, disoriented for a second before reality settles back in. The same ceiling, the same worn blanket, the same weight pressing gently against her chest. But something feels different, not in her surroundings, not in anything she can touch. Just a subtle shift in her thoughts, like a moment that refuses to be forgotten. And she sits up, brushing her hair back as she reaches for her phone out of habit before remembering it had died hours ago. She exhales softly and swings her legs over the side of the bed, her feet meeting the cold floor, grounding her again in the present, because there is no time to linger on strange rides or quiet strangers. There is only today, and whatever she can make of it. She pulls on her uniform, still slightly damp at the edges, and ties her hair back with practiced hands, the routine familiar enough to quiet the lingering thoughts, but not enough to erase them entirely, because every now and then, a fragment of last night slips back in, the way he asked questions, the way he listened, and she shakes her head slightly as if to clear it, because none of that matters now. It cannot. Not when rent is due and shifts are uncertain and everything depends on what happens next. Meanwhile, across the city, the glass tower reflects the morning sun in sharp lines of light. The lobby already alive with quiet efficiency as people move with purpose, suits pressed, voices low, and inside an office high above the streets, Ethan stands by the window, his posture composed, his expression unreadable as he watches the city wake beneath him. A file rests on the desk behind him, thin but precise, the result of a request made only hours ago, and after a moment, he turns and walks toward it, picking it up with steady hands, his eyes scanning the details quickly but carefully, each line confirming what he had already begun to suspect, not through numbers or records, but through small choices made in a car on a rainy night. He pauses briefly at a note near the bottom, something simple, something easily overlooked, but it makes his expression shift just slightly, not surprise, not exactly, more like recognition, as if a piece of a larger picture has quietly fallen into place, and he closes the file, setting it down with deliberate calm before reaching for his phone again. This time dialing a different number, set up an interview. He says when the call connects, his voice clear, controlled, leaving no room for hesitation. Sophie Carter. There is a pause on the other end, a question he does not bother to fully answer. No, she is not on the list. He continues, glancing out at the city once more. She is now. And when the call ends, he remains still for a second longer, his reflection faintly visible in the glass, no longer the stranger from last night, but the man who has already decided what comes next, even if she has not yet stepped into it. The diner is already loud when Sophie pushes through the back door, the sharp scent of coffee and grilled food filling the air as plates clatter and voices overlap in a steady rhythm that leaves no space for hesitation, and she ties her apron quickly, slipping into motion before her thoughts can catch up, because here everything moves fast, orders shouted, tickets printed, seconds counted, and if she slows down even a little, she risks falling behind. And yet even as she moves between tables, balancing trays and forcing polite smiles, a part of her mind keeps drifting back to last night, to the quiet car, to the questions that did not feel random, to the way he looked at her like he was trying to understand something deeper than her words, and she shakes it off again, focusing on the present, because none of that belongs here, not in a place where tips decide whether she eats dinner or not. Table 4 needs coffee. Her manager calls out, and she nods quickly, grabbing the pot and moving without pause, the routine pulling her forward, grounding her in something familiar, something predictable, until the rush begins to ease just slightly, and she finally takes a breath, leaning against the counter for a second longer than she should, her feet aching, her shoulders tight, when the bell above the front door rings, a soft chime that barely stands out in the noise, but something about it makes her glance up anyway, and for a moment, she freezes, because the man standing just inside the entrance looks out of place in a way she cannot immediately explain, his clothes too clean, his posture too composed, his presence too calm for a place like this, and her heart skips once, sharp and unexpected, because even from across the room, even under different lighting, she recognizes him, the same eyes, the same quiet intensity. But now there is no rain, no dim dashboard glow, nothing to blur the reality of who he might be. And yet he does not move toward her, does not call her name, just stands there for a second as if taking in the space, the noise, the world she lives in, before stepping forward and choosing a seat by the window, alone, and Sophie turns away quickly, her pulse quickening as she grips the edge of the counter, trying to steady herself, because this does not make sense. People like him do not just show up here, not twice, not like this. And one of her coworkers nudges her lightly. "You okay?" she asks, and Sophie forces a small nod. "Yeah, I am fine," she says, even though her eyes keep drifting back to him, to the way he sits there patiently, not checking his phone, not looking around, just waiting, as if this moment was always going to happen. And after a few seconds, she exhales slowly, picking up a notepad and forcing her feet to move, one step at a time, until she stands in front of his table again, the same distance as last night. But everything feels different now. And when she finally speaks, her voice is steady, even if her heart is not. "What can I get you?" she asks, and he looks up at her, a faint, almost knowing expression crossing his face, as if he had been expecting this exact question all along. For a second, neither of them speaks, the noise of the diner fading into the background as Sophie stands there with her notepad, waiting, even though it feels like she is the one being observed again. And he leans back slightly in his seat, his gaze steady but not uncomfortable, just aware. "Coffee," he says finally, his voice calm, familiar in a way that sends a quiet ripple through her chest. "Black," and she nods quickly, writing it down even though she will not forget. "Anything else?" she asks, keeping her tone professional. But he pauses, studying her for just a moment longer before shaking his head. "That is enough," he replies, and she turns away, exhaling softly as she walks back toward the counter, her thoughts racing faster than her steps, because this is not coincidence anymore, not in the way she understands it. People do not just appear twice like this, not in her world. And she pours the coffee carefully, watching the dark liquid rise in the cup, grounding herself in the simple motion before carrying it back to his table, setting it down gently in front of him. "Here you go," she says, and he nods once, his fingers brushing the edge of the cup as he looks at her again. "Long shift?" he asks, repeating the same question from the night before. But here, in this place, it feels different, almost like a reminder, and she lets out a small breath, half a smile forming despite herself. "Something like that," she answers, and for a brief moment, the tension eases, replaced by something quieter, something almost normal, until he speaks again, his tone shifting just slightly, more direct this time. "You did not take the money," he says, and her hand stills where it rests against the edge of the table, her eyes flickering to his, confusion crossing her face before understanding follows, slow but certain. "The wallet," she says softly, and he nods, watching her closely, and she shrugs lightly, as if the answer should be obvious. "It was not mine," she replies, simple, unguarded, and he studies her for a second longer, as if weighing that response against something unseen, before he leans forward slightly, lowering his voice just enough that it does not carry beyond the table. "Most people would have at least looked inside," he says, not accusing, just stating a fact, and Sophie tilts her head slightly, meeting his gaze without hesitation. "Maybe," she says, her voice steady, "but I am not most people." And the words hang there between them, quiet but firm, and something shifts in his expression, subtle but undeniable, like a confirmation he was waiting for, and he leans back again, wrapping his fingers around the coffee cup. But he does not drink it, not yet. "What if it had changed your situation?" he asks, his voice softer now, almost curious, and Sophie glances toward the counter, where her manager moves quickly between orders, where the reality of her life continues without pause, and then back at him. "Then it would not really be mine to keep," she answers. And there is no hesitation this time, no second guessing, just quiet certainty. And for a moment, the noise of the diner fades again, leaving only the space between them, filled with something unspoken, something building, as if this conversation is not just about last night anymore, but about something much bigger that is slowly, carefully coming into view. The moment lingers just a second too long, as if the air between them has grown heavier with everything that has not been said yet. And Sophie shifts slightly, breaking the stillness as she straightens up, her grip tightening briefly around her notepad before she steps back. "I should get back to work," she says, her voice polite but distant now, as if she is trying to place a boundary she does not fully understand. And he nods once, not stopping her, not pushing, just watching as she turns and walks away, blending back into the rhythm of the diner. But his gaze follows her longer than it should, tracking the way she moves between tables, the way she handles small frustrations with quiet patience, the way she never once cuts corners even when no one seems to notice. And something about that confirms what the file could not show, what numbers and records never capture. And across the room, Sophie feels it again, that awareness, like being observed without being interrupted, and she forces herself to focus on her tasks, on refilling drinks, clearing plates, taking orders. But her mind keeps circling back, not just to him, but to the questions he asked, the way he framed them, like each answer mattered in a way she cannot quite define. And time moves forward, slow and fast at the same time, until the rush begins to settle again. And when she finally glances back toward his table, she notices something new, something that makes her steps falter just slightly. The coffee cup is still there, barely touched, but beside it sits a folded piece of paper, placed carefully where it could not be missed. And her pulse picks up as she approaches, not because she expects something, but because she does not know what to expect at all. And when she reaches the table, he is gone. No sound of a chair moving, no goodbye, just absence, as if he slipped out between moments. And she stands there for a second, staring at the empty seat before her eyes drop to the paper, her fingers hesitating just briefly, before she picks it up, unfolding it slowly. And inside, written in clean, precise handwriting, is a single line, simple but deliberate. "Be at Blake Enterprises. 10 a.m. tomorrow." And beneath it, nothing else, no explanation, no signature, just an address she recognizes instantly, because everyone in the city does. And her breath catches slightly as she reads it again, the words settling in with quiet weight, because this is not a suggestion, not exactly, but not a demand either, more like an invitation that carries something deeper beneath it. And she looks back at the empty chair once more, as if expecting him to still be there, to explain, to clarify. But there is only the faint echo of his presence and the steady hum of the diner continuing around her. And for the first time since last night, she feels something new rise beneath the confusion. Not fear, not quite, but anticipation, sharp and uncertain, like standing at the edge of something she cannot yet see, holding a piece of paper that might change everything, even if she has no idea how or why. The rest of the shift passes in a blur, but Sophie barely feels it, every movement automatic, every smile practiced, while her mind stays fixed on the folded paper now tucked safely into her apron pocket, its presence impossible to ignore, like a quiet weight pulling her attention back again and again. And each time she brushes her hand against it, the same question returns. Why her? Why this? Why now? Because nothing about her life has ever included glass towers or invitations that come without explanation. And yet the address on that paper is real, more real than anything she has allowed herself to imagine. And by the time her shift finally ends, the sky outside has darkened again, the city slipping into evening with a familiar hum, and she steps out onto the sidewalk, the cool air hitting her face as she exhales slowly, her body tired but her thoughts wide awake. She reaches into her pocket and pulls the paper out once more, unfolding it carefully, as if it might disappear if she moves too fast. Blake Enterprises. 10 a.m. tomorrow. She reads again under her breath, her voice quieter this time, more grounded in the reality of what it means, and she looks up instinctively, as if she might somehow see the building from here, even though she knows it is miles away, standing taller than anything else in the city, a place where people like her do not belong, not without a reason. And she presses her lips together, folding the paper again, slower now, more deliberate, before slipping it back into her pocket. Because whether she understands it or not, the decision is already forming, not fully clear, not without doubt, but there, steady and growing. And later that night, back in the small motel room, she sits on the edge of the bed, her uniform draped over the chair, her hair loose around her shoulders, staring at nothing in particular as the silence fills the space. And for once, it does not feel heavy, just uncertain, like standing at a crossroads without knowing which direction leads forward. And she thinks about everything that could go wrong, about walking into a place that does not know her, about being turned away before she even reaches the door, about the possibility that this is nothing more than a mistake, something meant for someone else. But then she remembers his voice, the way he asked questions that felt intentional, the way he watched without judgment, and something inside her shifts, quiet but firm, because even if this leads nowhere, even if it changes nothing, she knows one thing with absolute certainty. She will not walk away from it without trying. And as the night stretches on, she finally lies back, staring up at the ceiling once more. But this time her thoughts are not stuck in the past or weighed down by the present. They are moving forward, toward a place she has never been, toward a moment that has not happened yet. And somewhere across the city, in a building filled with glass and light, a man sits in an office, high above the streets, looking out at the skyline as the last of the daylight fades, his reflection steady in the window, his decision already made. And for the first time, their paths are no longer crossing by chance. They are moving toward each other, one step at a time, leading to a morning that will change everything. The morning air feels sharper than usual as Sophie steps onto the sidewalk, the folded paper still in her hand, slightly worn now from how many times she has unfolded and read it. And she pauses for a moment before hailing a bus, her eyes lifting instinctively toward the skyline, where the tallest buildings cut into the pale blue sky, because somewhere among them is the address she cannot ignore. And the ride across the city feels longer than it should, every passing block pulling her further, away from everything familiar, until finally the bus slows and stops, and she steps off onto a street that feels entirely different from her own, cleaner, quieter, lined with glass and steel that reflect the morning light in sharp, almost blinding angles. And then she sees it, rising above everything else, Blake Enterprises, its name etched in polished metal above the entrance, unmistakable, impossible to ignore. And for a second, she just stands there, her breath catching slightly as reality settles in, because this is not a place she ever expected to stand in front of, not dressed the way she is, not with nothing but a folded note and a quiet sense of uncertainty guiding her forward. And people move around her with purpose, stepping in and out of the building without hesitation, as if they belong here, as if this is normal. And Sophie glances down at herself briefly, smoothing out her sleeves, adjusting her posture just enough to steady herself before taking a step forward. Then another, each one heavier than the last, until she reaches the glass doors and pushes them open, stepping into a world that feels both distant and immediate at the same time. The lobby wide and bright, filled with soft echoes of footsteps and quiet conversations. The air cooler, sharper, carrying a sense of order she is not used to. And she hesitates just inside, unsure where to go, until a voice cuts gently through the space. "Can I help you?" And she turns to see a receptionist behind a sleek desk, her expression polite but curious. And Sophie takes a small breath, reaching into her pocket to pull out the paper, her fingers tightening slightly around it before she sets it down on the desk. "I was told to come here," she says, her voice steady despite everything. And the receptionist glances at the note, her expression shifting almost immediately, something subtle but unmistakable, like recognition, like understanding. And she looks back up at Sophie with a different kind of attention now. "One moment," she says, her tone more formal as she picks up the phone, speaking quietly into it. And Sophie stands there, her pulse quickening as seconds stretch longer than they should, her eyes moving briefly across the lobby, taking in the scale of it, the people, the quiet confidence that seems to fill the space. And then the receptionist sets the phone down, her posture straightening slightly as she gestures toward the elevators. "They are expecting you," she says, and the words land with quiet weight, because they are not surprised, not confused, not questioning. They are expecting her, as if this moment was planned long before she ever stepped through those doors. And Sophie nods slowly, her heart pounding a little louder now as she turns and walks toward the elevators, each step pulling her deeper into something she does not yet understand, but cannot turn away from anymore. The elevator doors slide open with a soft chime, and Sophie steps inside, the polished metal walls reflecting a version of herself that feels slightly unfamiliar, her posture straighter, her expression more focused, as if the building itself is quietly asking her to rise to meet it, and she hesitates for just a second before pressing the button she was told, her finger lingering a moment longer than necessary. And as the doors close, the outside world disappears, replaced by a smooth upward motion that feels almost too quiet, too controlled, like being carried into something she cannot fully see yet, the numbers above the door lighting up one by one, each floor passing with steady precision, and with every second, her heartbeat seems to match that rhythm, slow but undeniable, and she takes a breath, steadying herself, reminding herself that she chose this, that whatever happens next, she walked into it on her own terms. And when the elevator finally slows and the doors open again, the space beyond is different, quieter, more refined, the kind of place where every detail feels intentional, from the soft lighting to the subtle scent in the air, and a man in a tailored suit is already waiting just outside, his posture professional, his expression composed. "Miss Carter," he says, not asking, but confirming, and Sophie nods, her voice catching just slightly before she answers, "Yes," and he gestures for her to follow, leading her down a hallway lined with glass walls and closed doors, each step echoing softly against the floor, and she notices how everything here feels deliberate, controlled, nothing out of place, nothing uncertain, and it contrasts sharply with the unpredictability of her own world, making her more aware of every movement, every breath, until they stop in front of a set of double doors, larger than the others, more imposing, and the man pauses briefly before opening them, stepping aside to let her enter first, and Sophie hesitates for just a fraction of a second before stepping forward, crossing the threshold into a space that feels even more distant from anything she knows, the office wide and filled with natural light, the city stretching endlessly beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, and for a moment, she forgets to move, her eyes taking in the scale of it, the quiet authority it carries, until a voice breaks through, familiar and unmistakable. "You came," he says, and she turns, her breath catching as she sees him standing near the window, no longer just the man from the car or the diner, but something more defined now, more complete, his presence sharper, his posture more commanding, his clothes tailored in a way that leaves no room for doubt. And suddenly everything begins to align. The questions, the note, the building, the way people spoke to her downstairs, and she feels it all settle at once. The realization not loud, not dramatic, but steady and undeniable, and he watches her carefully, as if giving her the space to reach that understanding on her own. And when she finally speaks, her voice is quiet but clear. "You are not just a stranger," she says, and something in his expression shifts slightly. Not surprise, not quite, but acknowledgement. And he takes a step forward, closing the distance just enough to make the moment feel real. "No," he replies calmly, his eyes holding hers with quiet certainty. "I am not." And the weight of that truth settles between them, marking the moment where everything changes, not because of what he says next, but because of what she now understands. For a moment, Sophie does not move. The weight of everything settling quietly but completely, not overwhelming, not chaotic, just clear in a way she did not expect, and she studies him again, really studies him this time. The details she missed before now impossible to ignore, the precision in his posture, the quiet authority in the way he stands, the kind of presence that does not need to be announced because it is already understood, and she exhales slowly, grounding herself in the moment. Instead of stepping back from it, "Then why me?" she asks, her voice steady, not defensive, just honest, because that is the only question that matters now. And he does not answer immediately, not with rehearsed words or easy explanations. Instead, he walks a few steps closer, stopping at a respectful distance, as if the space between them still matters. "Because you made choices most people do not," he says finally, his tone calm but deliberate, and her brows draw together slightly, not in confusion, but in thought. "Returning the wallet is not extraordinary," she replies quietly, almost dismissing it. But he shakes his head once, his expression firm now. "It is when no one is watching," he says, and the words land differently, carrying more weight than she expects, because it was never about the wallet. Not really, and she realizes that now. The questions, the silence, the way he observed everything without interfering, it was all part of something she had not seen at the time, and she crosses her arms lightly, not closed off, just holding herself steady. So this was a test, she says, not accusing, just stating it for what it is, and he meets her gaze without hesitation. Yes, he answers, simple and direct, no attempt to soften it, no apology in his tone, just truth, and for a second, the room feels quieter, the city beyond the windows distant, as she processes that, not with anger, not with resentment, but with a kind of clarity that surprises even her, because part of her understands, even if she did not expect it, and he continues before she can respond. I have spent years surrounded by people who know exactly what to say when they think something is at stake. He explains, his voice quieter now, more personal. But you did not know anything was being measured, and that is what made it real. And Sophie looks down briefly, her thoughts shifting, not toward what he represents, but toward what he saw, the version of her that did not perform, did not calculate, just acted. And when she looks back up, there is something steadier in her expression now. And what happens now? She asks, not because she expects an answer, but because she wants to hear it, and he holds her gaze for a moment longer before speaking. Now I offer you a choice, he says, and he gestures slightly toward the city beyond the glass, toward everything she has never been part of. A position here, training, stability, a future that does not depend on chance. He continues, his words measured, not exaggerated, not persuasive, just clear, and then he adds, softer but just as certain. But only if you want it. And the silence that follows is different from before, not uncertain, not tense, but open, filled with possibility instead of doubt. And Sophie stands there, feeling the weight of both worlds at once, the one she came from and the one being placed in front of her. And for the first time, she realizes that this is not about him anymore, not about his test or his decision. It is about hers. And as she takes a small breath, steady and deliberate, something inside her settles into place, not fear, not hesitation, but resolve, because whatever she chooses next will not be based on survival alone, but on something far more powerful, the quiet certainty that she has already proven who she is, long before anyone ever thought to test it.